The moms at the company started posting about me online, claiming the free daycare I provided for their children was a prison and a dirty trick to pressure them into working late. What they didn't know was that the daycare had been built with imported equipment and staffed by internationally trained professionals. It cost nearly $8,000 a month per child to operate. The internet piled on anyway, calling me a show-off, a fake role model, and worse. So I swallowed my frustration and sent a company-wide announcement. Effective immediately, the free daycare program would be discontinued. It would be replaced with a childcare benefit. Eligible mothers would receive $200 a month. The moment the notice went out, people flooded the hallway outside my office, pleading with me not to do it. "Ms. Hayes, please, look," one of them said, holding up her phone. "This is the nature collage the kids made today." My admin supervisor, Monica Reed, had already sent me photos. In them, a group of children sat in a circle around their teacher, arranging leaves and flower petals into tiny animal shapes. Their faces were bright, proud, peaceful. Looking at them, I couldn't help smiling too. I built this company with a single goal: create a workplace where working moms could do their jobs without constantly worrying about their kids. To make that real, I spared no expense. We built an in-house daycare in a prime office tower where rent alone cost a fortune. The facilities used top-tier, eco-friendly materials. The teachers were a professional early education team, and a nutritionist customized the meals. The cost per child was over $8,000 a month, and it was completely free for employees. Almost every mom in the company enrolled her child. It saved them the commute, and it saved them from brutal daycare bills. For 3 months, the daycare received nothing but praise. I truly believed people would appreciate the goodwill. Until one day, a notification popped up on my phone. My boss built a free daycare. But I want to escape this gilded cage. I tapped it open. The post was written by someone in operations, Tessa Grant. She wrote, "Everyone envies our company for having free daycare. They say only a female boss would understand mothers. Well, I guess this is also the smartest trap a corporate boss can set. She uses our children to tie us down so we have no reason to refuse extra work. Want to say your kid has no one to watch them? Sorry, the company is already watching them for you. So we work 72 hours a week just like people with no families, grinding ourselves down. This isn't a benefit. It's exploitation disguised as empathy." At the end, she attached a photo of herself from behind, sitting at a desk late at night. The caption read, "I don't want to be bound. I just want to be a normal mom, clock out on time and go home to cook my kid a warm meal." The photo wasn't even taken at our office. I stared at it, stunned, then let out a short laugh I didn't feel. We didn't force overtime. In fact, to accommodate parents, we enforced a strict rule: no meetings after 5 p.m. The 72-hour week claim was pure fiction. And the part about wanting to go home to her child? Her child was at the daycare every single weekday, eating meals far more balanced than most families could afford, guided by staff who actually knew early childhood development. But the comments section didn't care about facts. Wow. What a manipulative boss. I knew it. No corporate leader gives anything without strings. Expose her. Let's take this company down. My grip tightened around my phone until my knuckles went pale. I turned to my assistant, Jordan Price. "Bring Tessa in." A moment later, a knock came. Tessa walked into my office like she owned it. Behind her stood a small group of other moms from the company, including Maya Collins. Last month, Maya's family had an emergency. I personally approved 2 weeks of paid leave and even advanced her pay so she could breathe. Now she stood behind Tessa with her head lowered. "Got a minute, Ms. Hayes?" Tessa asked, lifting her chin. She sat down on the couch across from me, without waiting to be invited. "I'm sure you've seen my post," she said. "I'm just expressing what everyone else is thinking." I looked at her, calm on the outside, cold underneath. How did a company benefit become a trap? I'm providing your child with an education that costs over $8,000 a month. And you call it exploitation? Tessa gave a mocking laugh. $8,000? You're twisting the logic, Ms. Hayes. That money doesn't go into my pocket. Besides, I don't need fancy-sounding educational philosophy. She leaned forward, eyes sharp with calculation. We want something practical. Convert the daycare budget into cash allowances. Give us the money whether we stay home with our kids or hire someone. That should be our choice. That's what real benefits are. Understand? What she wanted wasn't freedom. She wanted to turn a shared benefit into her personal payout. I glanced at the women behind her. Most avoided my eyes, suddenly fascinated by the carpet. Only Maya looked up for a split second, like she wanted to speak. But Tessa shot her a warning look, and Maya shrank back into silence. I took a slow breath, forcing my voice to stay even. The board approved the benefits. They won't be changed because you're demanding a payout. Tessa smiled like I'd entertained her. Unreasonable? Ms. Hayes, you don't understand the situation. She waved her phone. On the screen, the likes and shares on her post were climbing in real time. This isn't just my demand anymore, she said. This is the voice of every exhausted working mother out there. My jaw tightened. You're not obligated to use the benefit if you don't want to. And I'm not obligated to redesign the company around your personal preferences. Tessa stood, clearly done pretending to negotiate. She strode to the door and, without looking back, tossed one final line over her shoulder. If you ignore public opinion, who knows how big this gets tomorrow? The next day, the atmosphere in the office had shifted completely. In the hallways and break rooms, people lowered their voices when I passed. Some looked away too quickly. Others tried to hide smirks. Tessa's desk became the center of attention. A crowd gathered around her like she was some kind of hero. We've got your back, Tessa. Yeah, why should that money go to those international teachers? We don't get a cent. They can't fire all of us. The law won't allow it. I heard every word. And I understood the message perfectly. They saw me as a boss they could pressure, someone they could guilt, corner, and squeeze until I handed over whatever they wanted. That afternoon, Maya slipped into my office alone. Her eyes were red, and she carried a cup of coffee like it was a peace offering. Miss Hayes. Please don't be mad, she said softly. Tessa's just getting carried away because people online keep hyping her up. She set the coffee on my desk and spoke carefully, like she was rehearsing. Honestly, no one thinks the daycare is bad. It's just, if that money could be converted into allowances, things might be easier for everyone. I looked at her, the same employee I helped again and again. Really, I said. So you support shutting it down? Her eyes flickered with guilt, but she forced a smile. Of course I'm on your side. I'll always remember what you've done for me. I'm just worried about you. The online noise is hurting the company. Then she leaned in with a final push. Maybe you could compromise a little. Offer something small to calm everyone down. Sometimes it's better to go with the flow than fight it, right? Maya wasn't here to support me. She was their messenger, testing my limits, using my past kindness to convince me to surrender to their greed. Then Jordan rushed in, face drained of color. Ms. Hayes, bad news, he said. Tessa's post got shared by multiple influencers. Millions of followers. It's already top 10 trending. I refreshed my feed. He was right. A headline blared across my screen. Female CEO runs toxic daycare to exploit mothers. Under it, anonymous comments flooded in, newer, nastier, more confident. And what made my stomach turn was the detail. The IP locations were visible. Every single one traced back to inside our office building. I'm an employee. The daycare meals are awful. My kid got sick last time. The curriculum is fake. The teachers are just the boss's friends pretending to be professionals. Ever since daycare started, I can't take any time off. My mind buzzed as I read. I had reviewed every menu item with a nutritionist down to the ingredients. Everything was carefully sourced. The staff had been hired through top recruitment agencies after screening hundreds of resumes. The claims about denying time off were lies, blatant, provable lies. And I could practically picture who was typing them. People who had smiled in my face. People who had thanked me for saving them with childcare support. They had enjoyed every benefit I provided, right up until someone promised them cash. Maya stood there, still pretending to be concerned. Miss Hayes. It's getting worse. Why don't you listen to my advice? I picked up the coffee she'd brought and dumped it, slowly, completely, into the trash. Then I said, evenly, get out. Maya froze, shocked. Then her expression shifted into wounded performance. Ms. Hayes, Get out, I repeated, not even looking at her again. She left in a rush, offended that kindness had finally met a boundary. For a few minutes, the office was quiet. Then my phone started ringing nonstop. Partners. Investors. PR requests. Media inquiries. Angry messages. A flood of hateful DMs across every account I owned. Disgusting capitalist. I hope your company collapses. People like you don't deserve respect. That afternoon, I locked myself inside my office. Downstairs, I could already see the media vans parked out front, cameras pointed toward the entrance like they were waiting for a spectacle. I let out a short, bitter laugh. From this moment on, I wouldn't be anyone's inspiring female boss. I would simply be the person responsible for the company, and the consequences of other people's choices. I picked up the internal line and called Monica. Notify all employees, I said, staring out at the flashing lights outside, that our next meeting will be in the main conference room. 9 a.m. sharp tomorrow. Monica hesitated. Miss Hayes. Are we really compromising? No, I said, my voice steady as stone. We're making a final decision. I paused, eyes on the cameras, on the crowd gathering for drama they didn't understand. It's time they learn what happens when they confuse kindness with weakness. That night, I didn't go home when the lights on my floor went out. I sat alone in my office with the blinds half drawn, the city shining below like it didn't care about any of this, like it had never cared about anyone's reputation being dragged through broken glass. Jordan stayed too, silent at the small conference table, flipping through a stack of printouts. Legal pulled the logs, he said quietly. Wi-Fi access points, internal IPs, timestamps. Everything you asked for. I nodded, eyes on my phone as another notification buzzed. Another headline. Another stranger who'd never stepped foot in my building calling me a monster. I set the phone face down. Bring Monica in, I said. Monica arrived a minute later, hair in a loose bun, glasses slipping down her nose, the look of someone who'd been fielding chaos for 12 hours straight. Miss Hayes, she said carefully, like she was approaching a skittish animal. I want the daycare audited tonight, I told her. Not by us. By an external consultant. I want their credentials, their notes, their photos. I want menu plans, supplier invoices, staff certifications, CPR and background checks, safety inspections, incident reports. Everything. Monica blinked. Tonight? Tonight, I repeated. And I want you to pull every policy we have about overtime, meeting hours, paid leave, flexible schedules. Print them. Highlight the signatures. Pull the calendar rules. Pull the meeting logs for the last 3 months. I want reality on paper. Jordan slid a folder toward me. Also, the photo she posted. I opened it and stared at it again. Tessa from behind at a desk, night lighting, a dramatic caption. A perfect little martyr shot. Metadata says it wasn't taken in our building, Jordan said. Different camera model than company-issued phones. Timestamp doesn't match her badge entries. And the window view. It isn't our skyline. Monica let out a slow breath. So she lied. She didn't just lie, I said, my voice low. She recruited. The word tasted bitter. Monica shifted. What do you want to do? I looked at the framed photo on my shelf, my team in our first cramped rented office, all of us younger, eyes bright, sleeves rolled up, believing we could build something decent in a world that rarely rewarded decency. I want to end this, I said. Cleanly. Monica hesitated. The daycare. Are you sure about closing it? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I stood, grabbed my coat, and walked out. The daycare was still open at that hour for the handful of parents who worked late by choice, people on deadlines, people on client calls in different time zones, people who'd rather finish a task than carry it home like a stone. The moment I stepped inside, the noise of the outside world dulled. There was soft music playing, low and gentle. The air smelled faintly like chamomile and clean laundry. A few kids were sprawled on floor mats with picture books. One little boy was asleep with a stuffed dinosaur tucked under his chin, breathing like the world had never hurt him. A teacher looked up and recognized me immediately, then straightened with nervous respect. "Miss Hayes," she said softly. "Please," I replied. "No formalities. How are things?" She glanced around, like she was making sure the children couldn't hear adult fear. "We've been steady," she said. "The parents have been anxious. Some have asked if we'll still be here tomorrow. We told them we don't know." I nodded, eyes drifting to the wall where children's artwork was clipped to strings. Paper suns. Crayon families. A lopsided drawing of a building labeled Mom Work. And then, in the center, the nature collage. Leaves and petals shaped into little animals. A fox. A turtle. A rabbit with ears made of thin, trembling stems. It wasn't perfect. It was pure. I stood there longer than I meant to. A tiny girl wandered over, clutching a paper crown, and looked up at me with the blunt curiosity only kids have. "Are you the boss?" she asked. I crouched to her level. "I guess I am." She tilted her head. "Are you mad?" The question hit me harder than any comment section ever could. I swallowed, keeping my voice warm. "No. I'm not mad at you. Never at you." She stared a second longer, then offered me her paper crown like it was a peace treaty. I accepted it, because in that moment, refusing felt like breaking something sacred. When I stood again, the teacher's eyes were glassy. "They love it here," she whispered. "You built something rare." I turned away before anyone could see my face change. Back upstairs, I sat down and wrote 2 speeches. One that sounded like a politician, soft, apologetic, full of compromises and careful words. And another that sounded like the truth. At 3 a.m, I deleted the first one. By 8:30, the conference room was packed. The energy was sharp and restless. People whispered in clusters. Phones were out, screens glowing under the table like secrets. Tessa sat near the front, arms crossed, chin lifted. She looked pleased with herself, like she'd already won. Maya sat 2 rows behind her, shoulders tense, eyes darting everywhere except my direction. Monica stood at the side with a clipboard, jaw tight. Jordan was beside me, calm in the way people get when they've chosen a side and accepted the fallout. I walked to the front, placed my notes on the podium, and looked out at the faces I'd hired, mentored, promoted, defended. People who'd once told me, with tears in their eyes, that this company had changed their lives. Now, a good portion of them watched me like I was a villain in a story they'd already decided how to end. I waited until the room quieted. Then I spoke. "I built the daycare because I meant it," I said evenly. "Not as a stunt. Not as a trap. Not to force anyone into overtime." A few people shifted uncomfortably. Tessa's mouth curled like she was already preparing to scoff. "My mother worked 2 jobs," I continued. "She used to drop me off at a neighbor's apartment before sunrise. Sometimes she'd come back and I'd be asleep in someone else's bed with my shoes still on. She did what she had to do, and I learned early what it costs when a parent has to choose between keeping a job and keeping a child safe." No one interrupted. "Not yet." "So when I built this company," I said, "I promised myself that if I ever had the power to make that choice less brutal for someone else, I would." I lifted my gaze. "I did. I built the daycare. I paid for it. I staffed it. I maintained it. And I didn't ask for anything in return besides professionalism." I let that settle. Then I tapped the remote in my hand. The screen behind me lit up. On it were numbers. Dates. Policies. Screenshots. "This is our overtime policy," I said, pointing. "It states clearly that overtime is voluntary unless a role specifically requires it, and even then, it must be approved and documented. This is our meeting policy. No meetings scheduled after 5 p.m. unless you have written consent from all attendees and a documented business need." I clicked again. This is the calendar log for the last 3 months. No meetings after 5. Not one. A murmur ran through the room, small, hesitant. I clicked again. These are leave approvals. Here are the paid leave records for employees with children. Here are the advances. Here are the flexibility arrangements. I didn't look at Maya when I said it, but I felt the way her body stiffened anyway. Then I clicked again. The screen changed to a screenshot of Tessa's post. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't raise my voice. I just spoke like an adult presenting facts to other adults. This post claimed we work 72 hours a week. That is false. It claimed the daycare exists to tie you down. That is a subjective interpretation, but it is not supported by any company policy, practice, or record. Tessa shifted, lips parting, but I didn't let her take the wheel. I clicked again. Here are the internal network records from yesterday, I said. These are anonymous comments posted during business hours. Their IP addresses traced back to our building. That means they were posted from our network. A hush fell. Some people's eyes widened. Others stared at their laps. This, I continued, is defamation. It damages the daycare staff. It damages the company. It damages me personally. And it damages every employee here who is trying to work in a stable environment. Tessa finally stood. Are you threatening us? She demanded, loud enough to rattle the room. Because if you are, I hope you know how that looks. This is exactly what I said. You want to control us. I looked at her. Calm. Still. No, I said. I'm describing consequences. Her eyes flashed. We're mothers. We're exhausted. We're asking for respect. Cash would help. $200 is insulting. If you cared, you'd give us real support instead of forcing us to use the daycare you control. I held her gaze, then clicked again. On the screen appeared a breakdown: daycare operating costs, rent share, staff salaries, insurance, food, educational materials, maintenance, security. It wasn't a boast. It was a ledger. This is what it costs, I said. Per child. Each month. On average. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because quality costs money. Someone near the middle whispered, "That's insane." Tessa laughed sharply. And? That's your choice. Not ours. We didn't ask you to spend it like that. I nodded once, like I'd been waiting for her to say it. You're right, I said. You didn't ask. Then I clicked again. A photo filled the screen, Tessa's dramatic night shot, the one she'd used to frame herself as trapped. Next to it, a zoomed-in detail of the window. Next, a comparison shot of our skyline. Next, a report from the consultant Jordan had hired overnight, pointing out the mismatch. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just spoke. This photo was not taken in our office, I said. It was taken elsewhere. The room erupted into low gasps. Tessa's face changed, fast. A flicker of panic, then anger, then forced confidence. That doesn't prove anything, she snapped. Maybe I was working from another location. Maybe I didn't want to show the office because... I clicked again. Badge entry logs. Her name. Time stamps. She had left the building hours before the photos posted time. I didn't even have to explain it. The silence did it for me. Tessa's voice rose, desperate. So what? So I used a photo. That doesn't change the truth of how we feel. You're still using our kids. I cut her off, still calm. And now we're going to talk about what you want, I said. I clicked again. A title appeared on the screen, Final Decision. Some people leaned forward. Others looked suddenly afraid. I sent the announcement about closing the daycare, I said. Because the internet decided, based on a lie, that a benefit was a trap. And because a number of employees decided to amplify that lie from inside the building. I paused. I will not run a childcare program for people who believe it is a prison, I said. Not because I'm punishing anyone's children. Because I refuse to be responsible for a service that people are willing to smear for a payout. A sharp intake of breath rippled through the room. Tessa opened her mouth, but I continued. Effective next week, I said, the daycare will no longer be a free employee benefit. A wave of noise broke loose, whispers turning into protests, chairs shifting, phones being lifted. I raised my hand once, and Monica, standing at the side, stepped forward like a quiet warning. The room settled just enough. It will continue operating, I said, but as a separate, independent service. Employees may apply for enrollment like anyone else. The company will no longer cover the full cost. Someone cried out, but we can't afford it. I know, I said, voice steady. Which is why I'm also announcing a real childcare benefit package, not a symbolic one. That got their attention. I clicked again. A new slide appeared. Instead of $200, there was a tiered plan, a meaningful stipend based on income bands, plus an option to use the stipend toward the daycare if they wanted. Gasps again. Different this time, surprised, almost hopeful. But, I said, and the word landed like a gate closing, that benefit will come with a code of conduct. If you use company resources to defame company programs, staff, or leadership, you will face disciplinary action. If you post false claims using our network, you will be investigated. If you organize harassment campaigns against co-workers, you will be terminated. Tessa's face went pale. I didn't need to call her name. The room knew who I meant. And before anyone asks, I added, yes. We already have the records. Legal counsel is reviewing them. The conference room shifted like a living thing, nervous and suddenly self-aware. I looked at the crowd. There are people in this building who have thanked the daycare teachers to their faces, I said. People who have told me they finally sleep at night because they know their kids are safe downstairs. And then, the moment someone dangled cash, they typed anonymous lies like it was nothing. A few heads dropped. Maya's shoulders trembled. Tessa tried to salvage it, voice sharp. So you're punishing us for speaking up. Typical. You'll make an example out of me to scare everyone else. I let the accusation hang for a beat. Then I said, no, Tessa. I'm making an example out of truth. And finally, only finally, I let emotion sharpen my voice. You don't get to light a match under something good and then cry when the room fills with smoke, I said. You don't get to call the daycare a prison and then beg for it back when you realize $200 doesn't buy safety. The room went silent again. I took a breath, lowered my voice back to calm. The daycare staff will not be harassed, I said. The program will not be used as a bargaining chip. And my kindness will not be treated as a weakness. I clicked again. The last slide appeared, next steps. A timeline. A phone number for HR. A link for the new benefit application. A notice about an internal investigation into policy violations and misuse of company systems. I'm done, I said simply. Meeting adjourned. I stepped back from the podium. For a second, nobody moved. Then the room exploded into chaos, people talking over each other, scrambling to call spouses, to calculate daycare costs, to text group chats with panic-laced messages. Tessa stood frozen, eyes darting, realizing the crowd that had worshipped her yesterday was already turning into a stampede of self-preservation. Maya didn't move at first either. Then she stood, walked toward me, and stopped a few feet away like there was an invisible wall between us. Her eyes were wet, but her pride held her upright. Ms. Hayes, she whispered, voice breaking. I didn't write those comments. I swear I didn't. I didn't know what to do. Everyone was pressuring me. I looked at her for a long moment. I didn't soften. Not yet. Pressure doesn't erase choices, I said quietly. Her face crumpled. I know, she whispered. I know. Monica approached, efficient, clipped. Legal wants to see you, she murmured to me. And the consultant's report is ready. I nodded. Jordan leaned in. Media is downstairs again. They're expecting a meltdown. I glanced toward the window, toward the flashing lights. The waiting cameras. Let them wait, I said. Down in the lobby, reporters crowded the entrance, hungry for a female CEO to either cry or rage so they could slice it into a headline. Instead, they got silence. I didn't walk out. Not until my team had compiled everything, every credential, every inspection, every invoice, every policy. Not until we arranged for an independent third-party statement about the daycare's standards. Not until we drafted a clean, factual press release. And then, when I finally stepped into the lobby, I didn't look like a villain. I looked like a woman holding a folder. I stopped at the threshold, microphones lunging toward me like metal flowers. "Ms. Hayes," someone called. "Are you shutting down the daycare because employees criticized you?" I lifted the folder slightly. "No," I said evenly. "I'm restructuring it because false claims were spread that put children, staff, and the company at risk. We are moving childcare support to a model that includes oversight, accountability, and a clear code of conduct." Someone shouted, "Did you exploit working mothers?" I didn't flinch. "No," I said. "We have documented policies against forced overtime, documented scheduling rules, and documented leave arrangements. We will be releasing those records to the appropriate parties. We welcome an external review." Someone else pushed forward. "What about the allegations that the daycare meals made kids sick?" I opened the folder and pulled out a page, menu plans signed by a nutritionist, supplier lists, inspection approvals. "These are the menus," I said. "These are the inspection reports. If any parent has a medical concern, we will address it through proper channels. Not through anonymous misinformation." There was a shift in the crowd, subtle but real. Because facts are heavier than outrage when you stack enough of them. Over the next 48 hours, the story started to wobble. Influencers who'd posted the headline without checking began to delete, then repost with careful wording. A few tried to pretend they'd never shared it at all. And then the external consultant published their statement. The daycare was not only compliant, it was exceptional. The staff credentials were real. The equipment was real. The program was real. The only thing fake had been the narrative. Inside the company, the mood changed too. Not all at once. Not cleanly. But it changed. Parents who had screamed the loudest were the first to panic when they realized how little their $200 covered. They began showing up at Monica's desk, eyes wide, voices pleading. "Is there any way to keep our spot? Can we reapply? My sitter quit. The daycare near my house has a wait list." Monica, who had spent years watching me bleed generosity into policies, didn't smile. She handed them the form and pointed to the fine print. Application. Screening. Wait list. Priority given to families who hadn't participated in harassment or policy violations. No exceptions. Tessa tried to rally people again, but the crowd didn't form this time. Because fear had replaced righteousness. Because the fantasy of free money had been replaced with the reality of childcare bills. And because the moment the company stopped being a soft target, most people suddenly remembered they had mortgages. HR called Tessa in on Friday. She didn't walk out in handcuffs. This wasn't a movie. But she walked out with a box in her arms and her face a strange, brittle shade, like someone who had believed the internet would protect her from consequences. On the way out, she spotted me at the end of the hallway. She stopped, lifted her chin like she still had pride left. "You think you won," she said. I didn't move. "I think I learned," I replied. Her lips curled. "You'll regret this. No one will trust you again." I looked at her, then past her, toward the glass doors where daylight waited. "No," I said quietly. "The right people will." She stared like she wanted to spit something sharp and final, but there was nothing left that wasn't already hollow. She turned and left. Maya stayed. Not because she'd won my forgiveness, and not because she deserved comfort. She stayed because she came to Monica's office the next week and asked, with her voice shaking, to speak to me. When she came in, she didn't carry coffee this time. She carried a folded piece of paper. "I wrote a statement," she said, placing it on my desk. "About what happened. About the pressure. About how Tessa told us what to say, and how she promised if we all stayed united, you'd have to give in." I stared at the paper. Maya's eyes were red, but she didn't look away. "I'm not asking you to protect me," she said. I'm asking you to let me do one honest thing. I held the statement for a long moment, weighing it. Then I nodded once. Submit it to legal, I said. And understand something, Maya. She swallowed. Being forgiven doesn't mean being trusted, I said. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I know, she whispered. I know. Weeks passed. The daycare continued, but now it was quieter. Cleaner in the emotional sense, like the air had been scrubbed. The new childcare benefit rolled out, and for the first time, it felt like a structured system instead of a gift with my name on it. There were still complaints, of course. There always are. But now there were also boundaries. And strangely, once the boundaries existed, the company felt safer, not just for me, but for everyone who actually wanted to work instead of scheme. One evening, I went back downstairs without telling anyone. The teacher from before spotted me and smiled. You're back, she said softly. I nodded, eyes drifting to the wall. The nature collage was still there, but now it had a clear plastic cover to protect it. Someone had taken care with it. A little boy noticed me and trotted over, holding a paper animal. Look, he announced proudly. I made a turtle. It's a good turtle, I told him. He looked up at me, squinting like he was figuring out a secret. Are you the boss lady? He asked. I smiled, small and tired and real. I am, I said. He considered that, then shrugged in the way only children can, unbothered by adult drama. Okay, he said, and ran back to his friends. I stood there for a moment longer, listening to laughter that had nothing to do with trending topics, nothing to do with comment sections, nothing to do with greed dressed up as virtue. Then I turned and walked back upstairs. Because I still had a company to run. But this time, I ran it with something I should have used from the beginning. Not more money. Not more kindness. Not more goodwill. A spine.